I never thought my own parents would stoop so low. The day they abandoned my 8-year-old son Thomas at a church to teach me a lesson changed everything, all because I refused to give my irresponsible brother $30,000 for his foolproof investment scheme. Family is supposed to protect each other, not use innocent children as pawns in their twisted games. What happened next shocked even the police officers who took our statements. Before I dive into this heartbreaking story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members. Trust me, what happened 3 months later will make your jaw drop. Growing up in the Johnson household was like living in a kingdom with a clear hierarchy. My parents, Gerald and Nancy Johnson, ruled with strict control, and the roles were clearly defined from early childhood. I was the eldest, the responsible one, the one who needed to set an example. My younger brother Ethan, however, was the golden child, the cherished prince who could do no wrong. Our suburban Chicago home looked picture-perfect from the outside. Manicured lawn, white picket fence, and family portraits displaying beaming smiles. But inside those walls, the family dynamics were severely imbalanced. When Ethan crashed his bike, he got a newer, better one. When I achieved straight, as it was simply expected. When Ethan barely passed his classes, he was rewarded for trying his best. Miranda, you need to understand that your brother needs more encouragement. My mother would say whenever I questioned the obvious favoritism, he's sensitive, you're naturally strong. This natural strength they attributed to me became my identity by default. I learned early that I couldn't rely on my parents for emotional support. So, I became fiercely independent. While other teenagers were rebelling, I was working part-time jobs, saving money, and planning my escape through education. By some miracle, or perhaps through sheer determination, I secured a scholarship to study graphic design at a prestigious university. My parents' reaction, that's nice, but are you sure that's practical? Ethan is thinking about business school. Despite their lukewarm support, I thrived in college. My design portfolio won awards, and I secured internships that eventually led to job offers. Meanwhile, Ethan dropped out of 3 different colleges, each time with a different excuse, and each time bailed out financially by our parents. It was during my final year of college that I met Robert Anderson. He was studying architecture, and we met when his department collaborated with mine on a campus renovation project. Robert was everything my family wasn't: supportive, encouraging, and genuinely proud of my accomplishments. We dated for 2 years before getting married in a small ceremony that my parents attended with 4 smiles. And Ethan didn't show up to it all. Robert and I built a life together based on mutual respect and support. When we decided to have a child, it felt like we were creating the family we both deserved. Thomas came into our world 8 years ago, bringing joy I never thought possible. My parents finally seemed interested in my life, but only through their new role as grandparents. Then tragedy struck. 2 years ago, Robert was involved in a construction site accident. A structural failure that should never have happened took his life instantly. The world I had carefully built came crashing down around me and 6-year-old Thomas. Grief threatened to swallow me whole, but Thomas needed me. So, I pushed through the pain, working twice as hard to maintain our graphic design business while being both mother and father to our son. My parents offered minimal support, occasional babysitting, and obligatory holiday invitations, while focusing most of their energy and resources on Ethan's latest ventures. Despite everything, I maintained a strained relationship with my parents for Thomas's sake. He deserved to know his grandparents, and they seemed to genuinely care for him, even if their love came with conditions I couldn't quite articulate. Meanwhile, Ethan's pattern of financial irresponsibility continued into adulthood. There was the food truck venture that lasted 3 months, the revolutionary app that never made it past the concept stage, and the house-flipping business that flopped spectacularly. Each failure was cushioned by our parents' financial support, draining their retirement savings bit by bit. Family gatherings became increasingly tense affairs while Thomas played innocently. Oblivious to the undercurrents, I would overhear snippets of conversations about Ethan's next big thing. My parents aged visibly with each passing year, the stress of supporting their middle-aged son taking its toll. "You could help your brother, my father mentioned during last Thanksgiving as we washed dishes. You're doing well with your business." "Dad, I'm a single mom running a small design studio." "I'm not a bank," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "Family helps family." "Miranda, you've always been so selfish with your success." I let the comments slide as I had countless times before. For Thomas's sake, I smiled through the tension, never imagining how quickly things would deteriorate in the coming months. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Ethan showed up unannounced at my home office. Thomas was at school, and I was in the middle of a deadline for an important client. My brother's unexpected appearance, complete with designer clothes that I knew he couldn't afford, immediately set off warning bells. "Miranda, my favorite sister," he exclaimed, arms wide for a hug. I reluctantly returned. "I'm your only sister, Ethan," I pointed out, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Coffee? I've got about 20 minutes before my next call." Ethan followed me, chatting about inconsequential things. The weather, a movie he'd seen, asking about Thomas, but I could sense the familiar buildup to something bigger. My brother never visited without wanting something. "So," he finally said after settling at my kitchen island with a mug of coffee, "I've got an amazing opportunity one wanted to share with you first before I take it to my usual investors." I raised an eyebrow. "Usual investors? You mean Mom and Dad?" He waved dismissively. "This is different. This is guaranteed success. Cryptocurrency is the future." Miranda and I got inside information on a new coin that's about to explode in value. For the next 15 minutes, Ethan outlined what he called a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to invest in a new cryptocurrency called Secure Coin. According to him, this revolutionary digital currency would triple in value within 6 months, possibly sooner. "I just need some startup capital," he explained, sliding his phone across the counter to show me charts and projections that meant nothing to me. $30,000 should do it. I nearly choked on my coffee. $30,000? Ethan? That's insane. "It's an investment, not a gift," he insisted, his tone shifting from enthusiastic to defensive. "I'll pay you back with interest in 6 months. 50,000 guaranteed. And if it fails like your other ventures?" I asked, already knowing the answer. His face darkened. "It won't fail. I've done my research. These guys are legitimate and they're only taking a limited number of investors." "These guys? Who exactly are you working with?" Ethan's vague explanation about industry experts and crypto pioneers only increased my skepticism. That evening, after he left with promises to send me more information, I did my own research. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Secure Coin had all the hallmarks of a potential scam with anonymous founders and promises of returns that defied market logic. The next day, Ethan called repeatedly until I answered. "So, are you in?" he asked, bypassing any greeting. "I'm sorry, Ethan, but I can't loan you that kind of money," I said firmly. "Everything I found about Secure Coin raises red flags. I think you should reconsider." What followed was a tirade of accusations. I was selfish, unsupportive, and jealous of his potential success. When emotional manipulation didn't work, he switched to threats. "Fine. I'm going to tell Mom and Dad how you refuse to help family when you have the means. You've always been their disappointment. Anyway, Ethan, I'm a single mother with a mortgage and a business to run. Robert's life insurance went into Thomas's college fund. I don't have $30,000 to gamble on your latest scheme." He hung up without responding, and the fallout was immediate. My phone rang that evening. My parents, their voices heavy with disappointment. "Miranda, how could you refuse to help your brother?" My mother began without preamble. "Mom, it's a questionable investment at best, a scam at worst. I'm trying to protect him and you." We've always known you were jealous of Ethan, my father interjected. But to sabotage his chance at success, that's a new low. Over the next few days, the calls continued, each one more accusatory than the last. I stood my ground, even offering to help Ethan review legitimate investment opportunities instead. My suggestions fell on deaf ears. The final conversation happened. Exactly 1 week after Ethan's initial visit. My father called, his voice cold and threatening. Your mother and I have decided to help Ethan ourselves. We're taking a second mortgage on our house because that's what family does. We support each other. Dad, please reconsider. I've looked into this company and we don't need your advice, he interrupted. But remember this, Miranda. Family takes care of family. You've chosen to abandon your responsibilities to this family, and there will be consequences. You'll learn your lesson. The line went dead, and I stared at my phone in disbelief. The threat seemed hollow. What consequences could there possibly be for refusing to loan money I didn't have for an investment I believed was fraudulent? Then came an unexpected ally. My father's sister, Aunt Helen, whom I had rarely seen since childhood due to some old family rift, called me out of the blue. Miranda, it's Helen. I heard what happened through the grapevine, and I wanted you to know you're doing the right thing. We met for coffee the next day, and Helen revealed generations of toxic family patterns I'd never known about. Your father was the golden child too, she explained. Our parents drained their savings supporting his failed ventures while telling me I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. Sound familiar? Too familiar? I admitted. I cut contact after they refused to help with my husband's medical bills, but gave your father money for a boat the same month. Best decision I ever made. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Breaking the cycle is hard, but necessary. Helen's support fortified me for what came next. The first court appearance. Walking into the courtroom and seeing my parents, sitting with their lawyer felt surreal. They looked smaller somehow, older, but their expressions showed no remorse. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father stared straight ahead, jaw set in familiar stubbornness. The proceedings were brief but excruciating. Statements were read, including Father Michael's account of finding Thomas abandoned on church property. My parents pleaded not guilty, their lawyer arguing they had left Thomas in a safe haven out of concern for his well-being while I was having a personal crisis. A complete fabrication outside the courthouse. Ethan ambushed me in the parking lot. You happy now? He snarled, walking my path to the car where Alicia waited with Thomas. Mom and Dad could go to jail because you're too selfish to help family. They kidnapped and abandoned my son Ethan. I shot back. Don't you dare make this about money. They mortgaged their house for me because you wouldn't help, he continued, his face flushed with anger. Now they might lose everything. That was their choice. Using Thomas as a pawn was their choice too. Ethan's expression shifted from anger to something uglier. You always thought you were better than us. Well, enjoy your precious moral high ground while Mom and Dad lose their home. The revelation that my parents had actually gone through with mortgaging their house hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, I couldn't take satisfaction in their financial troubles. But I also couldn't accept responsibility for decisions they'd made as adults. As the weeks passed, the legal process ground slowly forward while our healing seemed stuck in place. Thomas's birthday came and went without a card or call from his grandparents. The silence was deafening, and explaining it to him broke my heart all over again. Sometimes people we love make choices that hurt us. I tried to explain as we shared. Birthday cake. It doesn't mean we did anything wrong. Will they ever love me again? He asked, his small voice steady, but his eyes betraying his pain. They do love you, I assured him. Though I wasn't entirely convinced, they just don't know how to show it the right way. The stress took its toll on all aspects of our lives. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night. A brick through our living room window with a note calling me a family destroyer. the school reporting a strange man asking questions about Thomas's schedule, leading me to install an expensive security system I couldn't really afford. Through it all, Dr. Bennett's words became my mantra. You're not responsible for other people's actions, only your response to them. My response was to create as much stability for Thomas as possible while trying to rebuild my own sense of security. Considered moving to a new neighborhood, perhaps even a new city. But Thomas had already lost so much. Uprooting him from his school and the few supportive relationships we had seemed cruel. Instead, I focused on redefining family for both of us. Family isn't always blood. I told Thomas one night as we made picture frames for photos of Alicia and her husband, who had been there for us unfailingly. Sometimes family is the people who show up when things are hard. As the 3-month mark of the abandonment approached, I felt a shift within myself. The initial shock and betrayal had hardened into something more resolute, a determination to protect my son and myself from toxic relationships, regardless of blood ties. I was no longer waiting for my parents to recognize their wrong and make amends. I was moving forward without them. It was a painful liberation, this acknowledgement that family could be both your greatest wound and your deepest loss. But somewhere in that pain, I found clarity. Thomas deserved better than conditional love, and so did I. I was reviewing client designs when the news alert flashed across my laptop screen. Major cryptocurrency scam busted, investors lose millions. With trembling fingers, I clicked the link, already knowing what I would find. The article detailed a sophisticated fraud operation centered around Secure Coin, the very investment Ethan had been so desperate to join. Federal agents had arrested the ringleaders who had allegedly swindled over $20 million from unsuspecting investors with promises of astronomical returns. My phone rang almost immediately. It was Patricia. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. "I'm looking at it now," I replied, scanning the article for any mention of Ethan's name. "The FBI wants to speak with you," she continued. "Apparently your brother's name has come up in their investigation." My stomach dropped. As a victim or a perpetrator? They wouldn't say over the phone. They're sending an agent tomorrow morning. Thorough. Next day, Agent Marcus Reynolds sat at my kitchen table, his manner professional but not unkind. "To be clear, Mrs. Anderson, we're investigating the activities of Secure Coins operators. Your brother, Ethan Johnson, appears to have been a mid-level recruiter bringing in new investors for a commission." The realization hit me like a physical blow. So, he wasn't just investing himself. He was recruiting others, including me. We believe so. The $30,000 he attempted to secure from me would have qualified him for a higher commission tier. "Agent," Reynolds flipped through his notes. "Did he mention specific return percentages? Guarantees of profit?" I nodded, recalling Ethan's enthusiastic pitch. He promised it would triple in 6 months. "Classic red flag," the agent noted. "No legitimate investment can guarantee those returns." After answering the FBI's questions, I sat in stunned silence. Ethan hadn't just been duped. He had actively participated in duping others. Had my parents known? Had they given him their house equity, knowing it was for a scam? My questions were partially answered the following week when Patricia called with news. "Your parents' house is in foreclosure," she said. Apparently they missed several mortgage payments. "The money they gave Ethan," I breathed. "Likely, Miranda. This doesn't change anything legally regarding Thomas, but I thought you should know." I thanked her and hung up, conflicted emotions swirling within me. Part of me felt vindicated. Their choice to support Ethan's scheme had consequences, just as they'd warned me about consequences for not helping family. But another part felt a deep sadness for the spiral of poor decisions that had led to this point. 2 days later, a knock at my door revealed my father standing on the porch, looking haggarded and aged beyond his years. "Dad?" I said, automatically stepping forward, before catching myself. Thomas was at a playdate with Alicia's son, thankfully not home to witness this unexpected visit. "Miranda," he replied, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "May I come in?" Against my better judgment, I let him in, leading him to the living room, but deliberately choosing separate seats. "What do you want?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. He looked around, taking in the home I'd built with Robert, now maintained alone. "The bank is taking the house," he said finally. "Your mother is staying with your cousin Susan for now." "I heard," I replied, waiting for whatever came next. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he continued, staring at his hands. Ethan assured us the investment was solid, time-sensitive, a sure thing. "Nothing is a sure thing, Dad. Especially not when it promises to triple your money in 6 months. He looked up sharply. "You knew it was a scam, didn't you? That's why you wouldn't give him the money." I suspected it was too good to be true. "Yes, I tried to warn you. You could have tried harder," he snapped. A flash of the old Gerald Johnson, breaking through his defeated demeanor. "Like you tried harder to not kidnap and abandon my 8-year-old son," I retorted, anger rising. "What are you really doing here, Dad?" His shoulders slumped. "We need help, Miranda. Your mother and I, we don't have anywhere to go." The audacity of the request left me momentarily speechless. After everything they'd done, they expected me to take them in. "You left my son, your grandson, alone at a church. You told him I didn't want him anymore. He still has nightmares, and now you want my help." "We made a mistake," he admitted, though his tone suggested he considered it a minor error in judgment rather than a traumatic act of cruelty. "We were desperate. Ethan convinced us his opportunity would solve everything if we just invested enough." "A mistake," I echoed incredulously. "A mistake is forgetting to pick someone up. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did was calculated emotional abuse of an innocent child." "We're still your parents, Miranda," he said, his voice hardening. "After everything we've done for you." "Done for me?" I interrupted. "What exactly have you done for me that wasn't also done twice over for Ethan?" "When Robert died, you babysat Thomas twice." "Twice?" "Dad, I was a widowed mother trying to keep a business afloat, and you were too busy." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. My mother began to cry silently while my father stared at Ethan with dawning comprehension. "We gave you everything," he said quietly. "Our savings, our house, our retirement." Ethan's demeanor shifted from defensive to desperate. It wasn't supposed to collapse like this. I was going to make it right before anyone found out. "With what money?" I asked. "The money you were trying to get from me, more victims." He had no answer for that. My father turned. To me, his expression unreadable. "Why are you showing us this? To gloat? To say I told you so?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm showing you this because despite everything, you're still my parents. You deserve to know the truth before the FBI interview. And because I wanted you to understand that when I refused to give Ethan money, I was trying to protect all of us, including him." "So what now?" my mother asked, dabbing at her eyes. "Are we supposed to thank you for this revelation?" Her bitterness stung, but didn't surprise me. Decades of family dynamics wouldn't change in one meeting. "Now we discuss how we move forward," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I've prepared a document outlining my terms for any future relationship between us and Thomas." I distributed copies of a simple agreement Patricia had helped me draft. It outlined basic expectations. No one supervised contact with Thomas until he personally requested it. Family therapy with Dr. Bennett before any regular visitation could resume. A formal apology to Thomas and their cooperation with the FBI investigation. "This is ridiculous," my father scoffed, pushing the paper away. We don't need your permission to see our grandson." "Actually, you do," Patricia interjected professionally. "Given the documented abandonment, any court would grant Miranda full discretion over contact between you and Thomas." "You're punishing us for one mistake," my mother protested. "It wasn't a mistake," I corrected her. "It was a choice, a deliberate choice to use an innocent child as a weapon. And it wasn't just one incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of choices that prioritized Ethan over everything, including your own financial security and Thomas's emotional well-being." I took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm offering conditional forgiveness and a path forward, whether you take it as your choice, but understand this. I will never again allow Thomas to be collateral damage in this family's dysfunction." My father stood abruptly. "We're not signing this. Come on, Nancy." My mother hesitated, looking between my father and me before slowly rising to follow him. "The FBI will be in touch." I called after them as they left. "Whether you cooperate or not is your choice, but it will affect the outcome." Ethan remained seated, staring at the damning emails still displayed on my laptop. "You could have deleted these," he said quietly. "Protected me like you protected our parents. Or me or Thomas." He flinched. "I messed up. I got in over my head with gambling debts. Secure coins seemed like a way out." His admission surprised me. Gambling. Started in college. Got worse after each. Failed business. The more I lost, the more desperate I got. He rubbed his face tiredly. "I never meant for it to go this far, but it did, Ethan. And now we're all paying the price." He nodded, the bravado finally completely gone. "What happens now with the FBI?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "That depends on what you tell them, how cooperative you are, and what evidence they already have against you and us, you and me." I consider the question carefully. "I can't have you in my life right now, Ethan. Maybe not ever, but I'll help you get treatment for your gambling addiction if you want it. That's all I can offer." He seemed about to argue, then deflated. "I'd like that. The treatment, I mean." The audacity of the request left me momentarily speechless. After everything they'd done, they expected me to take them in. "You left my son, your grandson, alone at a church. You told him I didn't want him anymore. He still has nightmares, and now you want my help." "We made a mistake," he admitted, though his tone suggested he considered it a minor error in judgment, rather than a traumatic act of cruelty. "We were desperate. Ethan convinced us his opportunity would solve everything if we just invested enough." "A mistake," I echoed incredulously. "A mistake is forgetting to pick someone up. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did was calculated emotional abuse of an innocent child." "We're still your parents, Miranda," he said, his voice hardening. "After everything we've done for you." "Done for me?" I interrupted. "What exactly have you done for me that wasn't also done twice over for Ethan? When Robert died, you babysat Thomas twice." "Twice, Dad? I was a widowed mother trying to keep a business afloat, and you were too busy funding Ethan's food truck to help." The front door opened, and Thomas's voice called out, "Mom, I'm home." Before he appeared in the living room doorway with Alicia, behind him, her expression changing from cheerful to concerned as she assessed the situation. Thomas froze when he saw his grandfather, his small body tensing visibly. "Grandpa." The fear in my son's voice crystallized everything for me. "Dad, you need to leave now." "Thomas, come give your grandpa a hug," my father said, ignoring me completely. Thomas backed away, moving closer to Alicia. "No, thank you," he whispered. My father's face darkened. "See what you've done?" Turned him against his family. "Alicia, could you take Thomas to his room for a minute?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. Once they were gone, I turned back to my father. "You did this, not me. You destroyed his trust when you abandoned him, and now you have the nerve to blame me. Your mother and I need somewhere to stay, Miranda. Just until we figure things out. No, I said firmly. I'll not bring that toxicity back into our lives. Thomas deserves better. I deserve better. So you'll abandon your own parents after all we've sacrificed for this family. I'm not abandoning you. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. He stood, anger replacing his earlier dejection. Your brother was right about you. Always thought you were better than the rest of us. As he walked toward the door, I called after him. Dad, I do hope you and Mom land on your feet, but it won't be by using me or Thomas ever again. After he left, I sat with Thomas, explaining as best I could that sometimes adults make bad choices when they're scared or angry. Like when I hit Joey last year when he took my action figure, Thomas asked something like that. I agreed, but bigger. Grandma and Grandpa made very big mistakes, and now they have to deal with those consequences. Are they going to be homeless? He asked, his compassion showing through despite his fear. No, sweetie. They have other family helping them, but they won't be staying with us. Good, he said quietly. They scare me now. His simple honesty broke my heart all over again. Later that evening, an anonymous email arrived in my inbox with a subject line, Your brother knew. The attached documents showed correspondence between Ethan and the Secure Coin founders discussing recruitment strategies and commission structures. Most damning was an email where Ethan specifically mentioned getting his parents to remortgage their house with a chilling line. They're good for at least $150,000. Working on my sister too, but she's more skeptical. I forwarded the evidence to Patricia, who confirmed it should go to the FBI. But before I did, I faced an ethical dilemma. Should I warn my parents that their golden child had knowingly led them into financial ruin? The decision was complicated, by the knowledge that they would likely never believe me over Ethan. Some family dynamics never change, no matter how much evidence exists to the contrary. After consulting with Patricia and Dr. Bennett, I decided to arrange a family meeting on Tsatami neutral ground. Patricia offered her office conference room with the additional security of her staff nearby if needed. The FBI investigation into Secure Coin was proceeding, but Agent Reynolds agreed to delay interviewing my parents until after our meeting. You're not obligated to give them this courtesy, Patricia reminded me as we prepared the conference room. They certainly didn't extend any to you or Thomas. I know, I sighed, but I need to do this my way. I need to look them in the eyes when they learn what Ethan did. She nodded, understanding my need for closure, if not agreeing with my methods. My parents arrived first, looking worn and diminished. My mother, Nancy, usually impeccably presented, wore mismatched earrings and hadn't styled her hair. My father's defiance from our last encounter had faded into something closer to resignation. Ethan arrived last, striding in with unearned confidence, designer sunglasses perched on his head. Despite the overcast day, his smile faltered when he saw Patricia sitting beside me. What's this, an intervention? He joked weakly, taking the seat farthest from me. Something like that? I replied. Coolly. Thank you all for coming. Can we make this quick? Ethan asked, checking his watch. I have a meeting with investors later. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. More cryptocurrency investors? I asked, opening my laptop like the ones from Secure Coin. His expression flickered briefly before settling back into practiced nonulence. That situation was unfortunate. I was a victim. As he stood to leave, there was a commotion in the hallway. Agent Reynolds appeared at the door with two other agents. Ethan Johnson, he asked formally. Ethan nodded, resignation washing over his features. We have some questions regarding your involvement with Secure Coin. Subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes creating boundaries isn't about cutting people off. It's about protecting what matters most. Thank you for listening to our journey, and I hope it helps anyone facing